TimeSplitters 2 came along at just the right time. Early 2000s gaming hardware was allowing devs to create real-time 3D worlds where no side sheets of context were needed to interpret what was on screen. Players were finally allowed to see vast distances on console, and detailed interactions with the world could abound. At the same time, this was before action shooters got too scared to not fix a glowing waypoint on screen to show you where to go to complete every objective in the level. So TimeSplitters 2, the 2002 FPS about preventing the titular aliens from messing with Earth's history, got to be a uniquely satisfying shooter where players were rewarded for interpreting the environment with the keys to completing their list of objectives. That this is such a unique style of first-person shooter when looking at the genre in its totality is surprising, but when you think about it, this is the perfect point in history for this type of gameplay to thrive. Graphics detailed enough so that you can make out anything mission critical at a glance, but also not so overly detailed with clutter to where the game needs to make use of waypoints or markers over the gameplay to single out mission-critical objects or characters. If your objectives tell you to blow up a communication dish or destroy files, pay attention and seek them out. They won't scream for your attention, but they won't fade into the background either. Helping this level of clarity are the stylized yet clean comic book visuals that have a positive impact in almost every facet of the game. The devs, Free Radical, were formed by ex-Rare employees who worked on Nintendo 64 FPS games like GoldenEye and Perfect Dark. And at a time where video game graphics were doing leaps and bounds every year, you have to wonder if this stylized look was to avoid the aging those previous games were already facing relative to newer titles at the time. I mean, a 5-year-old game making the most of modern technology in 2024 can look like this. In 2002, a 5-year-old game making the most of its hardware could look like a GoldenEye 007. And the choice to stylize TimeSplitters was a success in giving it a more ageless look. The charm and style ooze out of it with every squeeze, just as much as 22 years ago. And it affects the feel of the gameplay too. The weapons have this slightly exaggerated cartoony bounce to them that make them incredibly satisfying to use. Combined with the animated looking enemies, the whole game has a confident, lively energy. While technical limitation and art style combined to create one of the ugliest games mankind has ever created with GoldenEye, the same combo made TimeSplitters 2 a joy to be immersed in. But it isn't all wacky cartoon nonsense. We've discussed how the title respects players and doesn't handhold, but the game also respects itself. Some eccentric camp doesn't stop it from taking its environments seriously with atmospheric visual effects, grandiose scale, and at times haunting music. TimeSplitters 1 was clearly not the dream game ex-Rare employees make to carry on the legacy of GoldenEye and Perfect Dark. Probably to meet the launch of the PS2, it ended up being just a cool little hangout game. You put it on with friends for a few hours to do co-op missions, throw down in deathmatch, and to maybe mess around with the level editor. All while marveling at the fact that you're playing an FPS in full 3D on a console at 60 frames per second for like the first time ever. Thanks to that brand new PS2. The campaign's levels though were bare bones, always with the same single mission. You had to grab an item somewhere in the level and then go to the exit. Not exactly the epic follow-up to GoldenEye and its varied mission structure. Well, TimeSplitters 2 almost aggressively wants to build on that legacy, with the first level taking us back to the 90s to infiltrate a Russian dam, just like at the start of GoldenEye. Although this time with a uniquely TimeSplitters energy, variety, and style. Levels in TimeSplitters 2 keep the momentum going by consistently introducing new elements throughout. At the dam you start with a pistol and a sniper sneaking around, picking off foes carefully as you make your way into the interior areas. Then you'll find the assault rifle, which ratchets up the intensity of the battles from there on. Head down into the seedy labs beneath and the shotgun will be your reward, alongside an unearthed army of zombies. Survive this and back up topside. Things climaxed with a turret shootout, against an incoming attack chopper. Some of the most exciting moments of the game are when a level ends with the exit portal spawning in, but alongside a series of enemies trying to prevent your escape. You might feel your heart beating as you try to safeguard all your progress with a mad dash towards safety. What's important here is nothing outstays its welcome for long. You're presented with something new, wild, and exciting, and then a few minutes later it's on to the next thing. In some shooters, turret segments drag on an eternity, while here, they offer a quick burst of exceptional power before you quickly move on to the next activity. The entire pace of the game is also aided by the type of shooter this is, where running and gunning from the hip isn't just viable but a necessity when lining up precision shots is a rewarding but slower process than in PC shooters or shooters with iron sight modes. All this talk about gameplay diversity, and we haven't even praised the boldest aspect of Time Splitters, the premise itself. Each level being set in a different time period, with weaponry and enemies to match. You get unique assets that remain as such when they can only be reused so much in a game where levels are set decades apart. It's of course a great premise for a shooter, both in single player and competitive modes, preventing things from getting stale. Some levels have such charm and such a cool atmosphere, you end up wishing you could get a full game of it on the side, instead of just the quick 20-minute slice you end up with. A 1920s Mafia game in the style of the second level would be awesome.
I want him dead, you hear me? Dead!
Not all levels are created equal though. Objectives towards the end of the game start getting less creative, and a few cheap enemies start getting introduced to crank up the difficulty. But the best levels are very replayable. There's loads of extra challenges on the side with wacky concepts, not to mention the return of the map editor and all those juicy multiplayer features. But rather than continue to list features, I'm going to suggest you wishlist this game if you've never played it. Xbox, GameCube or PS2, doesn't matter. It's hard to bring up Time Splitters to anyone who's played the series and not get a smile in return. In many ways, Time Splitters 2 is the definitive late 90s FPS that got to be a cut above with the tech of the 2000s. Confident, eccentric, yet no less polished. There's a reason all gamers respect this one.